Hey guys, it's Clay from Clear Critique. As you may have noticed, it's been kind of hard to find anything decent to watch these days. Yet it seems like studios coordinated and decided, let's release everything in October. This next month is so stuffed with content that I can't do my usual 5 movies. So today, here are 7 upcoming movies of October 2021. As usual, I'm ranking each one as a watch, wait a while, or avoid. Be sure to subscribe if you liked the video and comment below with your own rankings for these movies. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. Let's go! First is one of the most anticipated films of the year, Dune, a remake of the ambitious but bungled 1984 original. I've spoken at length on why this recent mudslide of uncreative, unjustified remakes is such a problem, and why excuses such as, "it's for a new generation," or "I'm scared of challenging films because COVID," are less substantial than Will Smith's singing. I say all of this because 2021's Dune is exactly the kind of remake I support. The kind where the original was so beleaguered with problems that the thinking is, okay, let's get it right this time, or at least better. From the people who managed to see it already, there has been praise for its scope and world building, but also some detraction for that same world building superseding the actual plot. I'm aware that many people don't watch movies to see filmmaking as much as lore, come on, you know I'm right, and setting up a sprawling universe like this with plenty of sexy, algorithmic actors will surely be more than enough for the general audience. This is not to say there isn't promising filmmaking on display here. There's a strong sense of space, of massiveness, as the landscape and those pretty badass looking worms dwarf the characters. Dune sports director Denis Villeneuve and composer Hans Zimmer, so at the very least it'll be a feast for the senses. This is gorgeous stuff, but even more gratifying is that it's a sci-fi movie that looks weird and otherworldly. Add a strong crew and cast and I'd say this is an easy recommend, even if part of me worries it could be overstuffed. Dune hits theaters October 22nd, and it gets a watch. Next is The Many Saints of Newark, a prequel of sorts for the infamous series The Sopranos. For starters, I appreciate the idea of having James Gandolfini's son play his father, and man, talk about pressure. And original creator David Simon's involvement as a producer is certainly reassuring. And okay, director Alan Taylor's name is besmirched by Terminator Genisys and Thor: The Dark World, but those films' failures are mostly script-based, and he's got plenty of experience in TV about which to boast. The trailer is fine, if a bit generic, but the biggest problem for me personally is the color palette. One of the main themes of The Sopranos was the normality of these criminals, and this harsh, almost Twilight-esque color correction only works to nullify this. Sure, Simon's involvement and actors like Ray Liotta are warm welcomes, but I have to ask why this is even being made. Sopranos is, and I say this with no hyperbole, one of the best shows out there. Why tamper with it? Oh, and just as an aside, I plan to do a Breaking Bad vs. Sopranos review in December, and not to sound morbid, but if my channel doesn't pick up, it could be my last video. The Sopranos offers an inspirational level of wisdom, and I would have liked for this film version, in its design and dialogue, to imply anything on that level. Could be good, but I'm not holding my breath. The Many Saints of Newark comes to theaters October 1st, and I'm giving it a wait. Next is Lamb, winner of the Trippiest Trailer of the Year award that goes from dramatic to comedic to deranged, while a delightful Beach Boys track romps in the background. Did I mention the baby lamb being raised as a human? It's a strangely fascinating pitch, and the image of a lamb standing on 2 legs while wearing a coat is a perfect midpoint between disturbing and cute, which paradoxically makes it more disturbing. As a horror fan, I wish goats and lambs were used more frequently for scares, particularly ones with rectangular pupils. It can be an unsettling effect that's ripe for the genre. And since Lamb features many of them, as well as implies a larger one, the mother perhaps, we should expect some good creepy moments. Unfortunately, there are so few details about Lamb. It's a small film by a first-time director, with little in terms of a marketing push. I do think its core idea is enough for a recommendation, but I also recall many great horror concepts that ended up not taking advantage of the horror, pushing it to the sideline to focus on the less interesting drama. Crossing fingers, that's not the case here, but I'm still teetering on the fence. Lamb will be in theaters October 8th, and it's getting a wait. Next is Last Night in Soho by Edgar Wright. Already the film has much going for it both in terms of marketing value and filmmaking. Wright is a geek icon due to Scott Pilgrim and Shaun of the Dead. Anya Taylor-Joy has a lot of heat on her right now, so any project with which she is involved will receive some form of coverage. As for the trailer, while I hate the, once again, dramatic cover song cliche, I love the focus on imagery rather than dialogue. We get a vague notion of the plot and are teased with snippets of color and terror. Other trailers have effectively used flashes of striking imagery to instill a mood rather than dump exposition. Alien is a great early example, and The Lighthouse from 2019 does this so well, it's honestly better than the movie itself. Edgar Wright has made a name for himself by satirizing certain genres while simultaneously celebrating them. And while I'm not a huge fan of The World's End's comedy or the quite frankly crap story of Baby Driver, every film he has done is a must-see for its style and technique. What's interesting here is that Last Night in Soho does not look satirical at all. Nothing about its tone implies comedy, and if you showed the trailer to anyone, there's no chance they would have guessed it's an Edgar Wright film. Based on this alone, I'm intrigued, not to mention the visual flair and the director's supreme level of skill. Plus, the early reviews of it have been pretty positive. Last Night in Soho will be in theaters October 29th, and I'm giving it a watch. Number 3 is The French Dispatch from Wes Anderson. As a big fan of Anderson's films, I unfortunately have to start with a criticism. See, his films have become more visually impressive and boast larger casts, yet have suffered in the scripts. Having to balance so many plot lines and motivations, the films lack focus, and too often have to do a clumsy wrap-up in the third act. Dialogue, something Anderson once excelled at, has been slacking lately. Maybe it's due to not having Owen Wilson as a writer anymore, but some of the script decisions make scenes overly wordy and monotonous, such as the different timelines in Grand Budapest Hotel, or the bizarre choice to repeat lines in Isle of Dogs. I mention all of this because The French Dispatch appears to be the apex of these issues and assets. The visual composition is masterful, certain shots remind me of Impressionist paintings, and the cast is astounding. Since Anderson has a predilection for talented misfits, it's logical that the story centers on a motley crew of artists and journalists. However, with such a gargantuan cast and timelines fighting for time, Dispatch makes me wary for the reasons I mentioned. If you like Wes Anderson, then of course this is a watch. Even if it's too much of a good thing, you don't want to miss out on all that good. Yet, if you're interested in discovering what the Anderson rave is all about, I would start with Rushmore or Royal Tenenbaums before diving into this beautiful mess. The French Dispatch comes to theaters October 22nd, and if I had to choose, I'm still giving it a watch. Number 2 is Venom: Let There Be Carnage. The first trailer for this movie is the worst trailer I've seen this year. Starring in this trailer, opposite Tom Hardy doing his best impression of someone with shell shock, is another dramatic cover song cliche which really doesn't fit here at all. The tone can best be described as schizophrenic, hopping between goofy comedy and action epic, and neither is done well. Woody Harrelson's repeated chaos line comes across like a bad imitation of Heath Ledger's Joker. Venom's voice still sounds like the Cookie Monster but less funny, and the graphics look like gooey shit. The first Venom movie was sloppy, with its lifeless villain, terrible third act, and grade school "ain't this awesome" dialogue that wouldn't pass muster in an early 2000s blog. But it made money, so the sequel was inevitable. My biggest problem with the first film, other than its overall presentation, was how sanitized it was. From the PG-13 rating to how it made Venom a hero because he was a loser on his home planet. God, that movie sucked. But at least here, there's a viciousness being implied by Carnage. So that's something. I know I'm not going to convince anyone not to see it, but I'm not going to encourage anyone either. There are more promising silly movies, action movies, violent movies, and movies that combine all three out there. This is cringeworthy gloop. Venom 2 hits theaters October 15th, and I'm giving it an avoid. And finally is No Time to Die, the next film in the James Bond series. Now, it's more apparent than during any other Bond era that this will be the last film of a certain actor in the role. Other actors seem to go just one film too many, and out of those who have done more than 2 films thus far, none of them have had a decent finale. This pedigree, along with the reshoots and Danny Boyle dropping out, may have meant doom for this film, but the script faced that doom with, Dune. I do not understand why on earth this film would include major elements like the love interest and bland Blofeld from the previous film Spectre. That movie was polarizing at best, a dull disaster at worst, with a theme song so corny I make an effort to mock it any chance I get. That movie sucked. Rip off the Band-Aid. No Time to Die is Craig's number 5, and it's been tumultuous thus far. I dearly hope this defies history and ends on a high note. There is plenty on the film's resume to applaud. If you recall this picture I showed of Hans Zimmer's work, you'll see how he offers much range as a composer, and I have no doubt he would excel at an espionage score. The production design looks good, and Rami Malek is an excellent choice for the main baddie. This is one of the few franchises I'm actually invested in, and I'm happy to say I'll be releasing a video about my favorite Bond scene as part of a multi-YouTuber collaboration on September 30th. That being said, I have no qualms about slamming bad entries. The question is whether this movie's production and story missteps will weigh down a promising presentation. I think it's worth the risk, even the risk of being called a dumbass in the comments. No Time to Die will be released to theaters October 8th, and I'm giving it a watch. What are you guys going to see in October? I'd love to hear everybody's watch, wait, and avoid rankings for these movies in the comments. If you want to support the channel, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd, and I'll see you guys later.